Hello and welcome to today's Bitrix24 webinar, Better Business Processes. Thank you for joining today. Okay, so we'll just go through some introductions. So my name is Sam Connor. I'm a sales engineer here at Bitrix24 Gold Partners Interface. We're based in the UK, the US and Hong Kong, and we offer a full range of services to help you with Bitrix24. So starting off with pre-sale support, so we can scope out your requirements in detail and really help you to evaluate Bitrix24. If Bitrix24 is a good fit for essentially what you're trying to achieve, we can then implement your requirements. If you're interested in an on-premise edition, we can provide our hosting services, and then we'll provide training and ongoing support to really help you get the most value out of your Bitrix24 system. Okay, so if you've come to today's webinar to get more details about what Bitrix24 has to offer, Bitrix24 is a collaboration suite of well in excess now of 35 different tools that you can use to manage your business. Now, there are over 10 million customers around the world that use the Bitrix24 system, and it's available in two different editions. So we have the Bitrix24 Cloud, and there's also the Bitrix24 Self-Hosted, or also called the On-Premise edition. And prices start from $49 per month for a cloud-based system and $2,990 for a self-hosted edition. Okay, so today's webinar is Better Business Processes. So we're going to be looking at how we can create and manage processes directly inside our Bitrix24 system. So the business process module within Bitrix24 allows organizations to essentially execute and monitor workflows on objects such as documents. It could be CRM items like leads and deals, but then it can also be on other items such as tasks or HR processes like leave requests and expenses. So Bitrix includes a very advanced editor tool with action blocks, which allows you to create and construct your very own business processes. So in today's webinar, we'll be going through the different types of processes we can create, and then we'll be looking at a few examples as well. Okay, so first of all, what we want to do is understand the different types of business processes that we can run in Bitrix24. So let's now go through those different types. So really we have three different types of processes. So the first one we can see here is a sequential business process. And a sequential business process really performs a series of consecutive actions on an item from a predefined start point to a predefined end point. So if we just go into our Bitrix24 system, then what we can do is we can see here we have a sequential business process. So we have a start point, and this then flows to an end point. So we can see all of the defined stages that we are progressing the workflow through, and then we have the end point there. So you have the start and end point. The second type of process that we can create, if we go into our drive area, then what we can do is we can run a state-driven business process. And the key difference between the sequential and state-driven processes is that the state-driven process does not have a start and an end point. So if we go into our drive section, and we'll just go and have a look at an approval document with states, we can see here the difference. So there's no start and end point on this particular process because this is a state-driven business process. So this has a series of statuses, and each status triggers a child process. So for example, on this particular document, if the document is sent for draft to the draft stage, it then sends an approval and this publish task. So based on the status, we then have certain actions on that child process. Excuse me. And we also then have another type of process, which is automations. And these are very powerful, especially inside the CRM system. where we can run automation rules. So for example, here we're inside our leads database. So what we can do is we can run automations based on the stage that the lead is at. So for example, as soon as the lead comes in at the new inquiry stage, what we could do is we could send out an automated email to that lead so we can automatically thank them for their new inquiry. So you can see here how automation can streamline your sales processes inside the system. And automations are also very heavily used in a new feature called robotic process automation. So what Bitrix24 did is some people found the business process designer tool where you can create a sequential business process fairly complex. So what they have done is created a more simplified version using a lot of the functionality from the CRM system. So here essentially we can create different stages that we progress a workflow through. So here is a business trip. So first of all, we can create an expense. We can then submit it to our supervisor, and then we need to add our expense receipts after our trip. So all of this can create a flow of a workflow. And again, this uses automation rules to create that workflow. So it uses a lot of the same functionality as you've just seen inside leads. So this is another way of creating business processes using the robotic process automation tool. Okay, so what we'll do now, we'll just see if we have any questions. So if you do have any questions, please do add them into the question box and we can review those for you. Okay, so we've had a question come in earlier on. Is there a limit to the number of automations that you can run? And no, there isn't. So you can run as many automations as you like inside the CRM system. One thing just to be careful of is depending on the cloud tier license that you have, there may be a limit to the number of leads that you can actually add into the automation rules. Okay, so just to go back, so there we've looked at the different types of business processes that we can run. And so now let's take a look at how we can actually manage those processes. So now we're going to see where we can run those processes inside our Bitrix24 system. So essentially we can run business processes in a variety of different areas of the Bitrix24 system. So on the cloud system, we can run processes for HR and admin requests. So this could be, for example, managing leave requests and expenses. Inside the CRM system, we can run processes on really most CRM modules such as leads, deals, contacts and companies. They can also be run on documents, inside lists in a project, for example, and in tasks on the professional and enterprise cloud and on-premise licenses. But also with the self-hosted edition, which is the more advanced Bitrix24 system, it's also possible to create processes in other areas. So for example, when a user updates their profile, we could run a custom process. So it's just something to bear in mind if you're wanting to create processes, maybe in not standard functional areas of Bitrix. This could be possible with the on-premise edition of Bitrix24. So let's now take a look at some of those areas that we've just mentioned. So if we go back into, let's go into the feed section. So if we wanted to run maybe a HR request, let's go into our feed section. So we've got our activity feed area. And if we go to the more section, we have a workflow button here. So if we wanted to say submit a new leave request, then what we could do is we could run this directly inside our Bitrix24 system. So here we've opened up the workflow and we can see the selection of workflows that we can now select from to construct our form. So if I go to maybe request some annual leave, you can see this has opened up our leave form. So we need to now input this required information to submit our leave request. And the information you're adding into here, it can be completely customized depending on what you would want the users to input. So we can see here what's required. So I could input my information like so, and we'll come back to the leave request form in a short while. Okay, if we go into the CRM system, we've seen how we can run automation processes inside leads, and it's exactly the same inside deals as well. But let's go into one of our companies, for example, and we can see how we can run a process directly inside a company page. Okay, so we're inside a company. Now what we can do is go into the top right hand corner here. This is the workflow section. So if you're wanting to run a workflow manually, all we have to do is click on the button and it will open up the different types of workflows that we can run on the company entity. So that's something to bear in mind. You can create different processes for different entities. So if we go into a contact, you'll see the workflows within the contact page are different because we can create different types of processes on different entities. Okay, if we go into the drive area, you might want to run processes maybe on documents. So when a document is added into the drive, we may want to trigger a particular process inside here. So from here, what we need to do is actually press the configure business processes, activate that business process, and then we can run processes on the documents that we have stored inside our drive space. Okay, so now moving into look at our tasks. So let's go into our projects area. So to manage projects, we can do this inside a work group. And within here, what we can do, we can see different ways of managing all of our tasks. And based on that, we can then run automations based on what stage the task is at. Okay, so from here, what we could do is we may want to run an automation based on the stage. So if the task becomes urgent, we might want to notify a certain person within the team. So we could run automations based on the stage the task is at. And if we go into lists, lists are really useful in projects because it allows you to manage tables of information, essentially. So inside this particular list, what I can do is I can manage all of the expenses associated to a particular project. And we can see here the status of those different expenses. So I could click into here and I might want to look at all of those expenses that are currently pending on this particular project, or I might want to look at all of those that have been rejected. So we can see the status of all the expenses. And when we need to run an expense, I can select the workflow from here, and that could then send that particular expense to the project manager to either approve or reject inside the system. Okay, so we've had another question come in. Are specific business processes already added into my Bitrix24 system? So I assume there you're asking if when you are added to your Bitrix account, are there existing business processes? So yes, there are. So if we go back into our feed section, then what we can do is if we go into our workflow area, we can go to our workflow directory, and then we can see the standard business processes that are already included with your Bitrix24 system. So we have expense reports, general requests, leave approvals, purchase requests, and business trips. So those are the standard workflows within your Bitrix24 system. And then we can create our own bespoke integrations as well. Okay, so that's a look at how we can run business processes. So now what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at how we can actually create our very own business processes using the business process editor tool. So Bitrix24 includes a very advanced visual editor tool for building business processes, and it uses simple drag and drop technology, and it includes over 40 pre-built action blocks. So what we're going to do is we'll create a business process inside the CRM system, and we're going to run this on a deal. So what we're going to do inside here is we're going to go into our section here, and let's go into our settings. So within your menu item here, there's different ways we can access our workflow directory tool. So if we go into our settings, and what we can do is we can go to automations, and then we can select the business process tool, because we're going to create a new business process inside our CRM system. So once we've done that, this then opens up the different entities inside our CRM. And this is where earlier on we looked at how we can manage a manual process. So we went into the TechCo company page, and you could see a selection of business processes. And then we went into a contact, and you saw how the business processes were completely different. And that's because we can then build a business process in a specific entity. Okay, so let's now add a new template. And what we're going to do, we're going to be checking when the status changes on our deals. So we're going to be looking constantly at when a deal changes a certain stage, and we want to run specific actions. So let's call this deal stage change. And we're going to run this different ways we can run. So for example, we may want to just run this business process when the deal is added, or you may want to do it when something is changed, or you may want to just manually have this update as we want to manually run the business process. So you can see here when you may want to run this. So I'm going to do when anything is changed inside this particular deal. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is add some conditions, because we're going to be looking at different stages of the deal. So the first thing we can do, on the right hand side, you can see all of the different action blocks that we can add into our workflow, and it simply uses drag and drop technology. So from here, what I can do is I can select the condition box. Now what I want to do is I want to add another condition, because I'm going to look at 3 different stages. So inside here I can add that additional condition. So this is now going to look at 3 different stages of the deal. Okay, I'm going to be looking at the stage. So from here, this now shows you all of the pieces of information from your CRM system. And we're going to be looking at inside the UK pipeline. So I'm going to be looking at when we're gathering the requirements. Okay, so we're going to save that information, and let's just change the title to the stage of the deal. Okay, so we're just going to do that now for all 3 of those different stages that we're going to be looking at. Now, if you have any other questions, please do add them into the question box, and we can run through those during the intervals of today's webinar. And if you do need any training or any support with building any business processes inside your Bitrix24 system, please do contact sales@interface.com, and we can look to see how we can help you with building out those processes for you inside your system. Okay, so now we've added those different stages. So essentially now, every time a change is made inside the deal, it's going to be looking to see what stage that deal is at inside the system. And then from here, what we can do is we can add different conditions into here. So when we're gathering requirements, for example, we might want to schedule a phone call. And once we're at the send quote stage, we might want to add some additional details into this particular process. So let's say, for example, once we've sent the quote, we might want to run a credit check based on them to make sure they have enough credit available if they approve the quote. And then once we've got to deal is won, then what we may want to do is we might want to notify the sales manager, for example, and we also might want to send them a thank you for their order. So we could send an email to the customer thanking them for their order. So here we can run those different conditions, and what we're able to do is then we can manage at every single stage of the deal. It's going to automatically be looking for when that deal hits that stage, and we can then run those different actions on that deal. But the other way we could also run this is actually inside deal automations. So if we go into our deal section, then what we could also do, based on what stage the deal is at, we can run automation rules. And what's really nice within the Bitrix CRM system is for every single pipeline you have, you can create different automation rules and stages for every single pipeline you have. So if I go back into our UK office, we can see the automation rules. So we can send out an email to the customer, for example, and we can decide exactly when we run that automation inside the system. But we can also run automations for employees as well. So we could run activities such as tasks, or maybe notify people based on what stage the deal is at. And we can also run triggers. So a trigger can automatically update what stage the deal is at. So there's two different ways we can run automations. Automatically update the stage, and then based on the stage, we can then run automations that are below that stage. Okay, so that's a look at how we can create business processes using the Business Process Designer tool, and also by using automation rules, which can be done in leads and deals, and inside deals, you can run automations in each pipeline that you have. Okay, so now we'll move on to look at how we can actually trigger business processes. So what do we actually mean by triggering business processes? It's how the business process is actually initiated. So first of all, what we could do is we can run a business process when we either create or update something. So for example, it could be when we create a deal, we then want to run a particular business process, which could be, for example, sending out an email to the contact associated with the deal. Or we can also manually run business processes. So as we saw earlier on, we can manually create a process inside the company page of the CRM system. So in any entity of the CRM, you can also run manual processes. It's also possible to create and trigger processes using external application triggers, such as webhooks. So if you're wanting to maybe connect a trigger from an external source, that is also possible. And with the on-premise edition of Bitrix24, we could trigger that, say, for example, from an email. So, for example, a very popular feature with the on-premise edition of Bitrix24 is actually creating rules on mailboxes. So if we just go into the control panel of our Bitrix24 system, this is essentially the back end of the on-premise edition. So this would really be for your administrators. And so inside here, what we can do is we can add our mailboxes into the Bitrix24, and then based on that, we can create rules. So for example, it could be we want to create a rule so when someone emails a particular mailbox, we could automatically create a help desk ticket in the help desk module. So from here, when an email comes in, we could then automatically have a help desk ticket created in the help desk module for our support team to start working on. So we can do advanced triggers with the on-premise edition of Bitrix24. Okay, so there's a look at how we can trigger business processes. And now let's take a look at a few live examples of how we can run workflows inside the system. So first of all, let's have a look at how we could manage the creation of a new project as an example. So this could be a really useful use case if, for example, you have won a new deal in the CRM system. You then might need to create a project group for specific people to access with specific tasks that need to be completed for the onboarding of that new customer. So we could run this based on the deal hitting the deal one stage, for example. So inside our automations rules, using the workflow designer tool, when the deal is won, we could then automatically create a new project group in the system. Now I'm going to show you this inside the HR area of Bitrix, but it could be run inside the deal section of your CRM system. So inside here, we're going to go to the workflow and I'm going to create a new project. So let's call this August project. And we can see the different pieces of information we need to input for this particular project. So let's now select a manager. And then we're also going to select a designer. So we can see the different roles that we need to have. And now I'm going to select a deadline. Okay, so we can see some additional information you may want to input, such as a file. And a really critical area is the type that we're selecting here. Because based on the type, this is going to then decide what specific people and what tasks are created in the work group. So it's going to run this workflow through a specific flow based on the type we are selecting here. Okay, so we've run that workflow and I can see I've been notified now because I'm the project manager. So I need to add an estimated completion date and I'm going to approve this project. So we can see now we've been notified, the project's been created, and we can see some tasks that have also been created on this particular project. So we can see that automation start taking place. So it's bringing a group of people together. It's creating specific tasks that have to be completed. So you can really streamline your whole project creation flow by using the business process tool here. It can save you time and it can also save human error by making sure the right people and the right tasks have been added into that project group for completion. So you can then start working on the onboarding of your customers, for example. So that's a really good use case of how the workflow tool could work for you. And let's just take a look at the actual business process back end of that particular request. Okay, so we're going to go into the business process designer tool. So what we can see when we go into here is you can see this is a sequential business process because we have a predefined start point and an end point. So we can see here, the first section, we were asked to input information about the request. So we saw the form that we needed to add, and then we needed to choose based on the type of project. This is a condition. So based on selecting project A, that then added this scoping task into the system. But if we selected project B, there were then going to be a different selection of tasks and also different people being added to that task. So you can see how the conditions aspect can be really valuable for you because it allows you to create lots of different types of workflows within the overall workflow, which you can then select from. So that becomes a really powerful tool inside the system. Okay, so let's have a look at how we can manage our projects. And another really popular workflow is our leave approval request. Okay, so for example, if we wanted to request some annual leave inside the system, then what we can do is we can fill in this particular form here. And as I said previously, the information that needs to be inputted into this particular form is completely customizable for how you want the form to look and feel. So you could add different fields into this form and you can decide what is mandatory as well. So I can submit that information and that's now going to go to my manager to either approve or reject inside the system. So I can see here about that request and I might want to add a comment to Mark just so he's aware. Okay, so this is really useful because it allows you to then pin and have communications directly on a request that you have inputted. And then once we have either had that request approved or rejected, we're then going to see that inside our time and reports section. So if we go back into our system here, then what we're able to see in the absence chart is that absence chart view. So inside here, we'll see all of the approved absences across the organization, and you'll be able to see the time that they've had off in the system by selecting based on the different departments as well. Now, with the leave approval process here, as standard, there is no actual limit to the number of requests that a user can submit. So if you want to add a leave entitlement for each user, that's an additional feature that we have created inside the on-premise edition of Bitrix24. So we have a plugin for the leave management, so we can add a leave entitlement for each user, and that could then be visible inside their profile, so they can see the amount of leave that they have left in the system. And then if there's any entitlement left at the end of the year, they're able to carry that entitlement over to the next holiday year inside the system. So if that's something you're interested in, please do contact sales@interface.com, and we can go into more detail with you on that particular plugin we have for the on-premise edition of Bitrix24. Okay, so just now to go through some of the key differences between the cloud and the self-hosted. So most of the tools that we've looked at today are available in both the cloud and self-hosted editions. So they both include the editor tool and processes for documents, HR and CRM items. I think really the main difference and the benefit of a self-hosted is the option to run processes on extra modules. So it could be through the API, for example, looking at the email integration. So from an email, we could have a rule, which then creates a help desk ticket, for example. Or we could also create a bespoke integration using the API to trigger a new process. Now, just to make note, with the self-hosted edition, we are able to provide our hosting services for you. So if you're concerned about how the self-hosted could be hosted, we can host that for you. So please do get in contact if you have any questions about the self-hosted edition. Okay, so in summary today, we've seen how we can run business processes on lots of different entities within the Bitrix24 system, including documents, CRM items, HR, and lists. We've seen how we can use the Business Process Designer tool, which has simple drag and drop technology to build your very own workflows that can have very conditions to personalize that workflow request. And we've seen how we can create business processes triggered by manually adding that workflow. We can run them automatically, or it could be done by an external source such as an email or an API call. Okay, so here are a selection of the up and coming webinars. So we're here every other Tuesday at 11 AM Eastern time. So I hope you're able to join us on the next webinar. If you do have any questions before the next webinar, please do contact us here, sales@interface.com, and we'll be happy to schedule a meeting with you to discuss your requirements in more detail. Okay, thanks very much for your time today. Bye for now.